Minister, as you know, People Before Profit had a bill before this House that did proceed to committee stage, looking to get rid of the sub-minimum wage. It's an absolutely disgraceful discrimination against young workers that they would be paid less than the minimum wage, which is miserable in and of itself, £12.70, far below what a living wage should be. So the ESRI, among others, have recommended that sub-minimum wage rates should go. Are they going to go? Are you going to progress this? Are you going to dance to the tune of employers who want to keep people on low rates of pay?
Thank you very much, Laskin Corla. As the Deputy be aware, the Low Pay Commission in 2022 was asked to examine the issues surrounding retaining or removing the sub-minimum youth rates of the national minimum wage and to make recommendations on the matter. The Low Pay Commission asked the ESRI to conduct background research on the issue under the terms of the Low Pay Commission and the ESRI Partnership Agreement. This ESRI report, the ESRI report, on sub-minimum wages in Ireland was published in November. The ESRI study examines the incidence and the characteristics of young employees that are paid below the full national minimum wage. And the Low Pay Commission has now conducted an in-depth review of the sub-minimum youth rates and, informed by stakeholder consultations and that report, developed their recommendations on these rates. I published the Low Pay Commission's report on sub-minimum youth rates at the national minimum wage, just last month. As the Deputy is aware, the Low Pay Commission has recommended the removal of all sub-minimum youth rates of the national minimum wage. What's really interesting is that the Commission highlighted in its report that this is a complex issue. They said that the Government will need to give their findings and their recommendations detailed consideration, detailed deliberation, and they highlighted the need for the Government to take its own legal advice on the matter. That's what we're now going to do. I've also committed to commissioning an economic impact assessment for the recommendations, and the terms of the reference for it are being considered. The economic impact assessment will model the impact of making changes to youth rates on firms of different sizes and in different sectors. It will also consider the likely changes to the national minimum wage, given the Government's decision to progress to a living wage set at 60% of the median wage. This is quite a complex and nuanced issue, and for example, the sub-minimum rate varies considering different age groups. So 45% of 15 to 16-year-olds are in receipt of sub-minimum rates, but then less than 5% of 19-year-olds are paid less than these rates. Also, as we know, the use of sub-minimum youth rates is largely concentrated in accommodation, food and retail sectors, and these are sectors that we know are under pressure. So we will make a decision, to answer your direct question, we will make a decision on this important issue when the results of the economic impact assessment and the legal advice are available to us.
Well, it's complicated if you want to make it complicated, but it's simple if you oppose discrimination against young people. And it is simply wrong that young people should be exploited because they're young and paid less for doing the same job as somebody else who just happens to be older. It's a simple principle, and that discrimination should be removed. The real issue you alluded to, I think, at the end, is the pleadings of some in certain areas of retail and hospitality who disproportionately depend on young, very, very low paid young people on these sub-minimum wage rates. Now, there are other ways to help them, and that's what the government should be looking at, but there should be no faffing around on getting rid of the sub-minimum wage rates, which are extremely low. And to add to that, the actual minimum wage is very low, and the government and everybody knows it should go higher, so it's unacceptable young people should be on these rates.
Minister to respond.
Thanks very much, Deputy. And I know you alluded to in your opening remarks that you have a private member's bill on this. And I suppose what I'd just like to do is draw your attention to the line in the Low Pay Commission recommendation, which states that sub-minimum rates shouldn't be abolished before the 1st of January 2025. And the reason for that is because the Low Pay Commission has asked Government to consider the report and its recommendations to ensure all decisions are evidence-based and to get legal advice on this. They're the recommendations of the Low Pay Commission on this. And that's what the Government is doing. So we're looking at their recommendations, all of them, including abolition of it, but we're also looking at the recommendations which says get legal advice on this and study this in depthly. That's why we've commissioned an economic impact assessment. It's important to note that only about a quarter of those aged under 19 who could legally be paid the sub-minimum youth rates actually are. So 75% under the age of 19 are on the national minimum wage or above. And 80% of those who aren't on it are students. And yes, as you've said, a lot of those do work in industries that are vulnerable. But one thing I don't want to do is inadvertently create a situation where the people working in those industries have their hours reduced. And I know that there's international evidence that this has happened in other countries when decisions like this are taken. And that's part of the rationale for further investigating this.
I think workers who are not on the minimum wage, who are not on the sub-minimum rates, older workers lose out because employers depend on people that they're paying the lower rates. So it's actually the older workers who lose out in some of those industries in terms of what they're paid because of disproportionate dependence on people who are on sub-minimum rates. And I take the point, yes, in many cases, there's a very low proportion of people under those ages who are on the sub-minimum rates, but they are heavily concentrated in certain sectors. And I do not believe that those sectors, which may well deserve support, that support should be dependent on the exploitation of young people. And that's what's happening. It is exploitation. I don't know why you're shaking your head. For somebody who is 18 or 19 to be doing the same job as somebody who's 20 or 21 or 22 working beside each other, that's wrong. It's discrimination and it's exploitation.
Thank you, Deputy.
Deputy Boyd Barrett has alleged that some industries are disproportionately dependent on student workers. I don't believe this is the case. If you can show me evidence to the contrary, please do. But student workers are often, perhaps maybe during their summer breaks, are full-time, but most of the time of the year they're working part-time. And only a quarter of those under the age of 19 who could legally be paid the sub-minimum wage. And just to clarify, that is legal, that it is legal here in Ireland, that they could legally be paid that, actually are. So that means that 85% of those 75% of those who are legally able to be paid that rate aren't. They are paid the national minimum wage or above. That is industry doing the right thing by these people. What we have is a situation where the under 18s can't necessarily work the same hours legally, can't work the same hours as those over 18, and can't always do the same duties. We need to take that into account as well. That's why we're doing an economic assessment and looking at this further.